So we worked with our research and evaluation team to, like, as I said, quickly come up with some questions that would help us get information that would help us decide how to prioritize the ARP funds. And so we surveyed students, caregivers, staff, and our community partners. We heard from students and caregivers representing around 500 students. So caregivers responded. We did separate it out by child. So caregivers maybe responded multiple times based on their children. And we used our Education Leads home grant to pay $10 gift cards for every survey that we received back. And so I do think that helped us get a better response rate. So we're really grateful for that. And you can see on here sort of who of the staff that responded, and then our community partners that responded as well. I'm going to move pretty quickly because we don't have a lot of time, but I'm happy to share these slides if anyone is interested. And I'm going to pass it to Melissa to talk more about the details of what we heard.
Yep. So these slides are broken down on the top. You can see these are caregiver findings. So we surveyed both caregivers and then high school students. So for this first one with caregivers, and we've got it broken down by elementary, middle school, and high school. Some parents perhaps had a student that was in elementary school and in high school. And so we asked some questions about each student's experience in those schools. So the first one, what helped your child attend school regularly during your time of housing instability? Top one for everyone was consistent transportation. The second one was support from a parent or guardian. So I'm not going to go, you guys can all read the data, but I'll kind of cover the top areas for each of these. So the number one thing that parents or caregivers found that helped maintain regular attendance was that transportation piece.
I forgot to add one thing before we move to the next slide, is that we routed people. So if a parent or student responded that they were able to maintain consistent attendance, then they got these questions like what helped. And if they were not able, then they got questions of what got in the way.
Awesome. So then for the student findings, again, we did middle and high school students. So they also had the opportunity to take the survey themselves. Again, the number one area that they felt was help them attend school regularly was that consistent transportation piece, specifically the high school students. As you can see, about 79% said that's what helped them. The second one was the personal motivation to attend school. Support from school staff, support from a parent or guardian, support from a shelter or community organization. So those are some of the examples that we gave them. And then at the end, you can see they also said others. So if there was something else that really helped get them to school regularly, they had that opportunity to let us know as well. The next one, caregivers. So this is for the group that didn't have regular attendance during housing instability. So what got in the way of your child attending school? Again, the number one was the lack of consistent transportation. That was kind of the biggest barrier for families. And then the second area was the lack of ability to prioritize school. So all kinds of, as we know, all kinds of other stuff is going on in these families' lives outside of school. And sometimes at certain times, school might not be the number one priority. So they acknowledge that that often got in the way as well. And then student findings about what got in the way of school. 50% of the students said that it was their lack of motivation to get to school. And then the second one, again, the same thing, lack of ability to prioritize school. And I think those two are very similar. When you've got other stuff going on and life is chaotic, it's hard to have the motivation and to get yourself to school and do what you have to do in school. Lower, as you can see, lack of transportation, and then other things that they felt like got in the way. And then a lack of support, 12% said that they felt like that's why they couldn't get to school regularly. And then who at your school provided the most support for your child? So this is the caregivers. And so the number one person was the social worker. The really important about this slide and the next slide, which is the student findings, the number that felt like, as you can see in the middle, no one So some families, specifically mostly the middle and high school, felt like there was no one at the school that really provided their child with support during this housing instability. So that was a really big thing for us to see and realize, because that's a pretty significant amount of families that felt like there wasn't anyone at the school providing that support. Student findings, again, the number one person that really supported them during their time of homelessness was the social worker. But for the students, there was no one. For middle school, 23%, and for high school, 32% of students felt like there was no one at their school that was really supporting them during this time. Again, that's a really significant number of kids that didn't feel supported by their school. So that's really important for us to take that information and do something with it.
Melissa, when did you say this was done? The survey was done again?
We did the survey, Charlotte, what month did we do it in? This fall?
Yeah, we did it in October, but we surveyed students and caregivers who had experienced homelessness in the past 2 years. They were all included in our outreach.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And then the last section that we're going to talk about is which of those supports was the most helpful. And so for caregivers, that transportation piece was the most significantly helpful piece when they were experiencing homelessness, access to basic needs and access to technology. So again, this was a really important data for us to look at in determining what we were going to do with our money. And that transportation piece was the top, behind was the basic needs. And then again, for students, they kind of swapped. So they're, actually it's 20%. So it was pretty even. So the basic needs and that transportation piece, again, were the most important or the most helpful parts that helped them during their times of homelessness. And you can see the other things that we provide as examples: access to school supplies, ways to earn money, resources connecting to housing, having school staff that really understand housing instability. And so those are some of the rankings on that one. But again, that basic needs and that transportation piece were the kind of two big ones.
Thanks, Melissa. So we took that and sort of combined what we heard from that survey with what we heard from sort of our district-wide outreach and collecting information about what people wanted and needed, plus what we sort of have known just through our work with students and families about what their needs are. And we really found three main buckets. And I'll just say that I was like really hoping transportation wouldn't be on this bucket, right? It's not very fun. Right? There are so many other things that feel like we could be really innovative and all of these things, but like we just could not and cannot ignore that just basic point of how critical transportation is, because without it, we could be doing all these great things in the school, but if the kids aren't there and aren't there consistently, it's for naught. So definitely transportation needed to be up there with what we were doing, followed by basic needs and also mental health support. So this is how we mapped out our ARP funding. Lots of money in our transportation area. We're adding a scheduler. We have a scheduler specifically for our students experiencing homelessness. We're going to add someone to that. And then we're also going to expand our on-demand cabs. We unfortunately are using on-demand cabs at rates we have never seen before. And it's really important that we keep doing that. We're adding some summer social work time. And then in the basic needs area, maybe the thing I'm most excited about is being able to do another partnership with our housing authority to get some additional vouchers, so long-term housing support. And then what we fund out of that is the wraparound services that would enable families to take part in that. So that is, okay, one more thing. After the survey, there were so many questions that came up that we wish we, had more time to dig into. And so that's going to be sort of future work for us. So one was just that rate of students that felt like students and caregivers that felt like they didn't have anyone at the school. So we feel like our next step is to really dig in to see like, does that vary from site to site? What's happening at our schools and what can we do to support so that everybody feels that they have somebody at the school to support them? I tie that to that motivation piece too, to go to school. I mean, I think like motivation can feel very like individual, like I don't have enough motivation to go to school. I also think like if we aren't creating an environment where people feel like somebody knows them and sees them at school, that's definitely going to impact your motivation to show up in the midst of a crisis in particular. And then just thinking about how do we partner, how we better partner, and what's our role as a school district in providing these needs? Like where are we pushing on sort of housing and our housing partners, and where are we taking the lead? I think is like just a question to be mindful of and thoughtful of. So I will stop there.